everyone. Welcome. It's so nice to have all of you here. Just quickly before we start, 2 weeks from tonight on a Wednesday, the North Country Cordsmen will be here. They usually come every year. One of our people sitting here belongs to them. And they do a wonderful barbershop harmony. And the group has grown. You'll see an ad in highlights coming out next week. Also, November 12th, it's a Saturday night. The Center Presents decided to do a social. It's from 6 to 8:30. And the Center Presents thought it would be fun to display with posters all of the programs, well, not all, but a lot of the programs that we have put on over the years, and they would be fun to look at. Mitch Utel is going to play keyboard, and the Eastman Youth Choir will be here to sing a few songs. And it's $20 a person with appetizers and dessert. There'll be a cash bar, and a portion of that money is going to go to Willing Hands. I don't know if you're familiar with Willing Hands, but they're a nonprofit group that their mission is to have no hunger and to reduce food waste in the Upper Valley. So it's a very good cause. So if you can stop by on a Saturday night and enjoy yourself for a couple of hours, we welcome you. Tonight we're very pleased to have the officials of Grantham here. In fact, it was the Grantham Selectmen who came to us and suggested that they come here so that our community would have a better idea of who they are. And we thought that was just a wonderful suggestion. And so we've also got the fire chief and police chief here. And Bill Matson, who was our former president of the board of directors in Eastman, is going to moderate. And he is going to lead the panel on what they're going to do. And if you have questions, they can be asked from the floor. And in the back of the room, we have index cards if you'd rather write your question. And you can turn those in if that's what you would like to do. Anyway, we welcome all of the officials here and really thank them for giving of their time and wanting to do this. Anyway, welcome.
Thank you, Mary. First, I would apologize to anybody who was shut out of trivia and decided to come here. It's a very cutthroat game in there, so you're probably better off over in this room anyway. But it is good to see everybody here, and I'm pleased to welcome you. I'd also like to, Mary didn't introduce herself. Many of you, I think everybody knows who Mary Niles is, but Mary deserves some applause as well. This Eastman Presents program is a terrific asset that we have in our community, our broader community. It's advertised in Grantham's news as well. Lots of great programs, and it doesn't happen by accident. Mary works tirelessly on this, and I'd just like to give her a round of applause. All right. I am officially retired as your board president. It is very liberating. Jerry Edwards is applauding. I'm not sure if that's because he doesn't have to deal with me as board president anymore, or just on my good fortune of being away from the board. But while I was still on the board, one of our goals last year was to improve relationships with the town. And we spent a lot of time working with the select board, and I think made some very good progress on some difficult issues that have been around for a long time. And as part of that, one of the discussions that Peter and I had was, gee, it would be good for the officers of the town, the select board, the fire chief, and the police chief to spend some time with the community. And hopefully this will be a regular occurrence because it gives us a chance. We're probably, 2/3 of the town in terms of population. And probably close to 80 or 90% of Eastman is actually part of Grantham. So there's a huge amount of overlap here and a lot of common interests. And the opportunity to sit down and have discussion about things that are on your minds and questions that you have, and to hear the perspectives of the folks that give of themselves to make this a great community to live in is just a fantastic way to spend some time and a little bit of opportunity on a Wednesday evening. So with that, the first thing we're going to do is give people a chance to introduce themselves here at the table. If you have questions, it's really helpful for you to write them down. There are cards that Mary has. The big thing that gives me an opportunity to do as your moderator is to kind of group the questions together so that we're sure we get to them. There were some that were sent in advance, so we'll get to those as well. We'll also take questions from the floor if you'd rather ask them yourself. But that'll be the program in a few minutes, but before we get there, just an opportunity for the Select Board and the Chiefs to introduce themselves, and we'll start with the Select Board Chair, Warren Campbell.
Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to be gathered here together with everybody. It's kind of unusual that I'm in this position. I started out my political career as a cemetery sexton.
Did you get many complaints?
I never hear very many complaints, and it all seems to be working well. I've been the selectman for, I think, somewhere around 12 years. Guided solely and mainly by Connie, who has been there, I think, probably much longer.
You don't want to date her.
Yeah, and Peter has come along to help the both of us as we try to get through daily chores at the town. And once again, working all together, the three of us, I think we're somewhat successful in making the town run relatively smooth. Thank you very much for showing up this evening. I hope we can get your questions answered if you have some questions. And if it's not answered, please let us know, and we'll do our best to dig up the answer. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. I live here in Eastman. I moved here 25 years ago, and I've been a selectman for 24 of those years. And in all, I was looking back, and it's 42 years of public service in different positions in Springfield, New Hampshire, and here. I've done everything from school board to planning board, selectmen, budget committee, part-time police officer, fast squad, and continuing being selectman. And while I was a selectman when I first got here, I was in the legislature for representing Grantham, and my district was Grantham, Springfield, Plainfield, and Cornish. So that's my background. I live here on Clubhouse Lane, and I don't play golf.
But you get plenty of golf balls.
Plenty of golf balls, and I have plenty to do.
Good evening. I'm Peter Garland. I live here as well. We've been here since 2000, and my wife and Betty and I have 6 children, 21 grandchildren, and soon to have 11 great-grandchildren. That's my real claim to fame. When I'm not a selectman, I'm president of the Boston Nagashi School, where I've been president and CEO for the last 28 years. That is an international school started by people from Japan, and it's an international school for autistic children. And we have 165 children there and have a staff of 285. So it's very intense but very rewarding. In a previous life also, I was a selectman and member of the school committee in Natick, Massachusetts, where I was a semi-neighbor of Bill. And I did that for 25 years. So I have a little bit of experience.
Great.
Good evening, I'm John Parsons. I'm the police chief here in town, and yes, I am the guy who writes all those things for the weather. I used to fight tooth and nail with my English teachers because they always thought I had an issue writing. I guess I'm proving them wrong. I've been an officer here in Grantham since 2006. Prior to that, I came up to New Hampshire in 1999, and I was with the Lebanon Police Department from 99 through 06, and prior to that, from 91 through 99, I was an officer in New Jersey. So I went from walking a beat in full gear on a beach in 90-degree weather to walking a beat in full gear in negative 30-degree weather.
Hello, my name is Justin Hastings. I'm the fire chief here. I born and raised here, been here all my life. I've been on the fire department for 22 years now. My part-time job is the fire department, but my full-time job is I work for an addiction recovery program. So kind of busy. I have 3 daughters that have been raised here in town, and my wife works with the BDE, so I'm pretty integrated, more than I'd like to be some days, but
So thank you for those introductions. The one thing that I hope impresses you as much as it does me is the amount of years of experience and service up here, and these can be thankless jobs. I was in it for just a short time, but when you look at the amount of time that these folks have spent devoted to their various communities, not only here but in other places, it truly speaks to the fact that public service is alive and well in many parts of our country. There are some questions that came in, and again, we'll welcome questions from the audience, so if you have them, please feel free to write them down, or you can raise your hand at any time, but I've got some questions here as well that I'll go through. First question on many people's minds, and these are things, we have an internal listserv forum that people raise various questions and different things on, and it was buzzing about a month ago when the new property assessments came out. Eastman members received their latest assessment on property values this summer. Most of them ran to the realtor to try and see if they could actually get that much money for their house, but that's a different story. But they were up significantly, many averaging 40% from the last assessment. It'd be interesting to know a little bit about that process, but most importantly, we're getting ready to see property taxes being sent out soon. So how will these increased property assessments impact the property taxes we pay?
Sure. The property tax value is something that we do not project on everybody. We hire a firm that takes care of it. What they do is compare sales. They have a sheet that they go through, and your home would have so many different lines, and if it has a paved driveway, it would be like a plus. If it doesn't have a paved driveway, it wouldn't be. There's many things about your home that can be just checked off, and it's all pretty standard stuff as far as the assessors go. And what they try to do is blend together with what they know you have as a home in the lot that it's on. They blend that together with the sale price of homes that are similar or approximately the same size. The lots are the same size. Obviously, they're not going to be able to make two match because everybody's lot is different. The values of them went up. I think it's not a real surprise. I would hope that real estate has gone in a spiral and an upward direction for quite a while. And now it appears to be at or near the top and is perhaps on its way, or not as stabilizing anyway. It's not really going down at the moment. So having the different value for your home, it may not have a huge impact on your tax because we still operate on the same basic budget. We have been starting to work on the budgets, and because of a lot of factors that are going on, I know some of the budgets we've worked with so far have only gone up because it involves either diesel fuel or electricity or any sort of thing that has gone up, and we just don't have any control over that kind of thing. So we are still working with essentially the same plan. We have to do the same things, we have the same amount of roads in town to take care of. We got the police department is approximately the same size. Fortunately, we just have someone new get onto the police department, so the coverage is better as we would prefer it. I think it's gonna be perhaps surprising when you do get your tax bill that it may be different. It may not be a lot different than what it was in the past. At this point, we can't really say exactly. Obviously, in a couple of weeks, we're gonna know. At that time, if you feel like something is not correct, you go through the same procedure where you contact the assessors, and they'll happy to sit down and listen and try to adjust if they feel like there's something that's out of line, or they'll explain to you all these different check boxes that they have to make the value of your home what it is, and can perhaps better give that to you. We really, other than kind of overseeing it, we don't really have any sort of control over the numbers there. So they're the ones that we rely on to give us information that is reliable, and if, once again, there's always the age-old question when you get that thing and you say, oh gee, it's a lot more than what I paid for it 22 years ago. But you sort of put that against, well, is that anywhere near what I would ask if I was selling it now? So you can kind of put that into perspective yourself, and to see if that has made you any more comfortable of what's going on. I think you're gonna discover that the change in your tax is not gonna be huge. It's perhaps gonna be different. Once again, we have things we have to deal with that are just going up, and we don't have control over that. Hopefully, that helps you out a little bit. Once again, we're here to answer other questions, or the same question if we have to, if we're not getting through.
So just in managing expectations, the budget process is separate from the assessment of property value. So you should not expect your property taxes to go up by the same percentage as your assessed value.
That's correct. Property taxes will go up if the budget changes.
And this tax setting time now is going to be using the value that you voted for at town meeting. That budget will then start for this next two tax payments. So we'll be raising the money for that now.
Yes?
Yes, how many more, children do you have in the schools? Because that, I'm sure, will impact, property taxes.
So the question, I'll repeat the questions just so everybody can hear. How many more children do we have in the schools, since that has a direct impact on the expenses and therefore the taxes?
I don't have that figure. Let me explain something regarding the taxes on your tax bill. It's broken down by in several areas. The town of Grantham actually is the smallest part of it. Then you have the village district, which is the tax on your water and sewer, and we send that out just as a courtesy for the village district. You'll also find a school tax, and the school is a separate entity from the town of Grantham. New Hampshire's a little unique in that you have several, quote, municipalities. DDE would be one, the school district would be another, and then the town of Grantham. You'll also see on there a state assessment for education and a county assessment. So there are several people with their hands in your pocket, I guess you'd say. And it's not all the town of Grantham, but it was actually the smallest part.
Yeah, Larry Shulman at 8 Turner Brave. We had an assessed person come from that company, do an assessment. We had a number of questions about it. They contacted and said if we contacted them, they would come back and we could go over the questions. Never heard from them again. So I don't know if that's been my experience alone, or if other people had similar experiences.
I know I contacted them and discussed it with Kevin from KRT, didn't get anywhere with it, but it was interesting though to find out how they did the assessment. And unfortunately, a lot of it was caused by the pandemic, where people had their houses, they couldn't sell them for $250,000, say. People came from out of state and said, I'll give you $4 for it. They sold them, and now the value is $400,000, and that jacked everybody's up.
Yes.
I also talked to the assessor, and they're under contract to the town to do their job. So they are, so while it is, I appreciate the idea that they did it, they really did, and they did it for you and us, and I mean that. And I really had two major issues with it. One was, didn't you just do this recently? And they said, yes, we did it 2 years ago. And we typically do it every 5 years. But apparently there was thought, hey, it's been, all of a sudden we saw this sales, prices were going up, and it seemed that perhaps we were undervalued versus what the market should be. So that was one question. So that was their comment. And then I went through how they actually did their work, and you're right, you have a card and it has all the information on it. But the driver of this was the sales of the community. And the sales were very strong, especially in the high-end market. The majority of us aren't in the high-end market, and we were drugged 48% higher than the last one. And I come from a community that understand they don't like messing with the tax rate at all. What they do is they make their increases on assessments, and they have an assessment process that drives additional monies, but it's kind of gradual, and they maintain it in a gradual manner. 48% assessment with the thought perhaps in my mind that I was gonna get a 40 or 50% tax rate increase, or tax increase kind of freaked me, to be frank with you. But after I talked and said, well, okay, then it's budget driven. But what I'm hearing is, and we don't know what the budget is just yet. And there are 5 or 6 elements to the budget, and the price comes out in a week or two. I'm kind of concerned that we're gonna see fairly significant tax increase, or tax period dollar increase. So 2 questions, why not every 5 years? And what happened in the last 2? You're absolutely right, we had a spike. Then the question is graduality. How do you ease into this?
Well, you have to understand that we're driven by the state. We have to follow state regulations. They tell us what to do and when to do it. And when your sales assessment ratio, what they like to see is that they like to see that in the 90s. Ours dropped to in the 70s.
That's what I heard.
And that meant that they said, okay, it's time. And we can choose our assessors, but they come from a list that our state approved. We can't just go out and hire an assessor. They have to be approved by the state. So generally, you get your assessing people in from that list of companies that have done business here before. And let me see, what was the other thing? We know what our budget is. We're going to be taxing on the budget that the town voted for the town in March. And the same with the school, whatever that budget number was. I can't keep all these numbers in my head at my age, but those are the numbers that will drive what the tax rate is. And the town, we're pretty much where we should be. But we can't predict.
So what I'm hearing is we don't really have a hard number just yet for the 5 or 6 elements within the budget. But we will when the budget gets.
Right.
When the bills come out.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and I think the key part of this is that the assessment does not drive the property tax.
I got that.
So what's interesting is if you look to appeal the assessment, the first appeal is to go back to the assessor. I had a similar experience to you. And then the next appeal that you do sends a note back, but they specifically ask that you not file that appeal until you see what your property tax bill is. And I think they do that because they know that there isn't a direct correlation between those two, and they'd like you to see your property tax before you set your hair on fire.
So they expected to get them after the tax bill's done.
But my understanding is that appeal still impacts what that tax would be. They just want you to have all the facts before you decide whether or not you want to appeal. Yes?
Bill, so I'm gonna jump to a different point about the actual total tax, the accumulation of several different things. And we're all fairly familiar with what happened in Croydon. One of the issues, kind of root cause, is simply that a small percentage of the town showed up because a small percentage of the town had kids in school, which yields the question of Grantham certainly is in that same position of there's a town budget, there's a school budget, and they're dealt with at different meetings. Is there any way to align the town and the school such that, they're voting on both on the same day? Because there are a lot of people in Grantham who are not involved in the schools, yet have to fund the schools, and better able to have an input into the school budget.
On the same day, I don't
I'm not sure.
I don't think you
understand
could
the
do
question.
that.
Is there some way to, I guess, coordinate so that, on a given day, people vote on the town budget and the school budget at the same meeting, on the same ballot?
But it's two different political subdivisions. You couldn't do it on the same day.
At the town meeting, it's not necessarily a long meeting, but there are a lot of people that are relatively tired by the time they get to the end of it. I'm not sure they really wanna look forward to dealing with the school budget at the same time. We could certainly look into combining it, but I don't think it would be for everybody's benefit to spend that much time in a meeting of that sort. They are two different entities. Having it separate would seem to me to make it a little bit easier to understand where things are coming from. If you have them at the same time, it would be some sort of difficulty where you may perhaps are overlapping, and I think it would become more confusing than it would be helpful.
No, I tend to disagree. The issue is simply that a lot of people are not involved in the schools, and the schools are deciding how to spend their money. So the right answer is everybody should show up at a school meeting, whether or not they have kids in school, right?
Exactly.
That's not.
Well, that's the school meeting as it affects your taxes. If you wish to have some sort of, I wouldn't say control, but some sort of way of adjusting that, going to the school meeting would be helpful.
That is the true lesson of Croydon, right? Any of these town meetings are important to attend. The work that these folks are doing is important to understand. That's part of the reason for this discussion tonight. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. One of the important assets, not only to the Eastman community, but I think to the broader community of Grantham, is Eastman Pond. And there have been a number of very talented and diligent people who have been working on the question of how we keep that pond pristine and the asset that it is to our broader community. One of the more significant risks to the pond is road salt. We've done a lot of work here in Eastman on our roads to train people on how to go about treating the roads in the wintertime, and also the materials that we use. But we could use some help, specifically the roads that the state maintains, Route 10 or Old Route 10 and I-89 north of Grantham. Both of those, the runoff feeds directly into Stony Brook, which ultimately works its way into Eastman Pond. And we have one of the highest chloride concentrations of any lake in the area based on a study that we have recently done. Would the town be open to taking a more proactive approach to reducing road salt upstream from Eastman Pond, particularly along those two routes that I mentioned?
We are certainly happy to take a proactive approach. The two road routes that you mentioned are controlled by the state, so we really don't, I mean, we can tell them that we would hope that they would use less salt, but we don't have any influence over the actual, whether they do that or not. We could let people know of the town roads that are in North Grantham. We can suggest that they operate on a different frequency as far as the amount of salt. And, once again, this is a difficult situation because if one person slips off the road, but, you know, whatever we saved in the salt, whether or not they got hurt, it's still become an accident that, you know, and then unfortunately the lawyers can get involved in who knows what. And, you know, just because we suggested to cut back on the salt and someone gets either hurt or some injured, you know, it becomes a difficult situation to say, you know, how far do you cut back on the salt? It's just one of those things that we can't really get a handle on, and because the interstate is where it is, and Route 10, we really don't have a long amount of roads in the town of Grantham, so we operate at a pretty, you know, pretty low salt for the size of the town, more or less.
Just a reference point. The other day, they were grooming the roads, and they were grooming Catamount Road, and just before the rainstorm, and I asked why they had a truck that was spraying liquid on the road, and the answer that I got from the maintenance department was it's a chloride that they use to bind basically the dirt together so that A, you don't have dust, and B, it doesn't break down. So maybe that's another area you could look at, is the whatever type of chloride that they're putting on the road. And I understand it's necessary to either have a dust complaint or but there's chloride that they were spreading on the road that day.
Yeah, I think it's all, there are balance points in all of this, and there have been some very good pieces of work done on how to manage the balance point between road safety and oversalting the roads. And that's what we spent a lot of time training folks here on. To the degree the town would be willing to do that on town roads, that would be terrific. We all have distancing levels of influence. So our level of influence here is a long way. You're a little bit closer to the sources of power to be able to influence. We recognize it isn't your decision as to how much salt gets put on the roads, but there are plenty of examples. You drive down the road and you'll see this is a lower salt application area where people are trying to protect watersheds. Anything you can do to lobby on our behalf is in the interest of the broader community that is able to use this as a great source of recreation.
In that study, I didn't see Lake Kalula over in Springfield, and 114 runs right by that lake, right on the shore practically. And I think the state has done something there with trying to keep at least less salt going in. I was surprised that wasn't shown on in that study that they had all different ponds, the Pleasant Lake, Little Lake, Sunapee, all the other ponds around it, but no Lake Kalula, and they had Baptist Pond too. So whoever's got that route, that would be good to talk to them from the state.
Okay, good. Yeah, just as a point of clarification to the broader audience, Lakes and Streams, which is a committee here, a council committee here in Eastman, with the staff, commissioned a piece of work to study the water quality in the lake and to think about things that we can do to keep the lake pristine. So we passed that study along to the select board as we prepared for this meeting. This is one of the good things that comes out of this, because we're able to share information back and forth as a way of being able to give them the insight that we have on what's going on with water quality in the lake. Question here.
First of all, I want to just thank all of you for your service. I know, I can't imagine how hard a job it is, but thank you. And I want to just follow up on the rock salt, road salt issue and a raft of environmental issues. And forgive me if you've heard this before and dispense with them, but I have a few questions and I'll try to be as brief as I can. But I'm frankly puzzled by why recycling, and I know this is a political hot potato, but why it can't be mandatory. Because if we're talking about budgets and bottom lines, there's also a social bottom line. And I go to the dump every week and I see trucks back up and, you know, put 30, 40 bags of what is, in my opinion, construction trash into the compactor, even though there's a recent sign saying if it doesn't go in your kitchen trash, it shouldn't go in here. Despite the educational efforts, there's still flagrant flaunting of the rules. So I'm curious about some kind of incentive for recycling. I'm curious about a pay-as-you-throw, because I know that there's been a struggle to get adequate numbers of people working at the transfer station. But again, if there was some kind of monitor or weight system or something to enforce, even strongly encourage recycling, we would save money on solid waste disposal, and I think a significant amount. So I'm very interested in how to ramp up the either requirement for, strong suggestion of, and ultimately the monitoring of recycling. I'm very interested in whether Grantham and the select board might consider a community compost alternative at the transfer station. Composting is a huge way to reduce methane, which is actually a more toxic greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. It lingers in the atmosphere longer. And many towns, even in New Hampshire, are starting composting programs at their dump. And there are different kinds. Many small towns around New England completely cover their diesel fuel, which you referred to earlier as a budgetary item, because they turn their compost into biodiesel. Other towns and cities, and certainly individuals, turn it into dirt. So I'm interested in mandatory recycling or a pay-as-you-throw. I'm interested in composting, and I'm very interested in whether the town might consider more solar arrays. Again, these all have very well-documented returns on investment data. And as long as we're talking about the budgets perhaps going up for good reasons, more police officers, et cetera, let's talk about ways to augment the income and try to, at the same time, help the earth, which is, as we all know, imperiled. And finally, I would love it if the town would consider selling rain barrels. Many towns and cities throughout New England do. We know about droughts. We've suffered them the last however many years. Rain barrels are easy, inexpensive, and very usable, and I'd love it if the town, and certainly Eastman as well, began to use them. And all of this is certainly encapsulated by the need, or at least affected by the need for public education. And it would be so great if we could have an environmental forum twice a year, or newsletter articles. I just feel like a community, as it was planned as an environmentally conscious community. I've been here 47 years. And that's why I bought here, because of the dream of an environmentally conscious community. I've written articles about it. But it seems that we've either reached a leveling off point, or there hasn't been sufficient advocacy or interest. I don't know the reasons, but I'd really like both the select people in Grantham and the board in Eastman to up their game about protecting the earth, and it bears on our lake, it bears on our roads, it bears on our wildlife, it bears on our health and safety. So I would volunteer to do what I could to help. I'm an environmental educator volunteer. After retirement, that's what I retired to do. And I would give anything to be of service in this, for this cause, because there's so much more we can do, and certainly eliminating phosphates. I mean, I try to buy laundry detergent, dishwashing detergent, and dishwasher detergent that are phosphate-free for our lake. I don't mean to preach or to make anyone feel guilty, but there's a lot we can do. And if our lake does get polluted and has invasive species, the reclamation costs will far outweigh what each of us pays in phosphate-filled detergents, what our rock salt costs. I mean, we have to think about cost savings versus cost shifting versus doing right by the earth. And I urge us to really keep our eye on the social bottom line when it comes to environmental concerns. We love Eastman because it's environmentally sustainable, and we owe the founders and the builders, the stewardship that they foresaw and expected to continue. Sorry to be so long-winded.
So there were some questions in there. So we keep focused on that.
Recycling.
Around recycling
Composting.
specifically.
Solar.
And different things that we can do at the transfer station to encourage more prudent management and disposal of our resources.
We've taken, I mean, we try, if you want to have, it will require more manpower, certainly, for these projects. And, but I think that education certainly is a big part of it. And I think that we can certainly work on that. And,
So I heard you were volunteering to help with that?
You did, but there has to be a political will, because it's all about priorities. And I believe that we would save on solid waste costs if we hired someone. And I think it's easier to get someone who's a monitor than to get someone to do the physical, rigorous labor to.
it's hard to get anybody.
I know.
Yeah, so
It may be a
if-
high school
if-
student.
If you'll take a look at this from a Grantham standpoint,
Yes.
I would also point out we're lucky to have 4, 5 board members here. Lynn Kisselback, who's the new president of the board, Phil Langsdorf, who's the vice president, Beth Truax is there, I saw Susan Meyer. So there are lots of people that as we finish up, you can go and talk to about volunteering to help with the education parts here in Eastman as well.
Thank you.
And we can use
Thank you for the
volunteers. We
receptivity.
have Energy Committee, we have the Conservation Commission, Dave's with the Conservation, James with the Energy Committee. A lot of opportunities to volunteer, as well as the fire department.
Yeah, we are always taking new volunteers, so.
Well, speaking of which, there were some questions for the fire department.
There was. So before I start with that, to your point, have you ever thought about taking your influence to the schools? Our schools are a plethora of children that are just trying to learn, and they're gonna bring those things back to their parents and hopefully help them to do the things that you really wanna do. So the more involvement you guys can have in the schools, you are paying for it. So it's your opportunity to help educate the kids to the way that you want to be taken care of as you're in retirement as well. So, I have, first question is how many volunteer firemen do we have? We actually are split as one department, but we have fire and EMS, so we have active 8 firefighters and 4 EMTs. We do have 1 paramedic that's a full-timer in Hanover that is here when he can be. And we have 2 EMRs that are basically like a first responder, so they're gonna come and help stabilize until Lebanon gets here. And then Eastman has no hydrants, so how will the fire trucks get water? So we have engines that are designed to pump out of the lake. We have dry hydrants throughout town. You might see them at the Eastman dock, or the boat launch, I mean. You see a hydrant like that, so what that means is there's no water actually in the hydrant. So we back up to it, we have a pump that will suck the water into that hydrant, we get water through there. We also have a tanker truck that carries 2,000 gallons of water on it that's vacuum. So when we back up to that we can use the vacuum and fill that truck actually faster than an engine could fill that truck. So we have those capabilities. We also have responders coming from, for a big fire, we'd have someone coming from Springfield, Croydon, Lebanon, and Enfield, and all of them have the same capabilities. So what we would do is set a fire truck at the lake, and they would just be filling trucks. So the trucks would just do a rotation, they come up, we top them off, and then that way we can keep an even water supply going to the fire. Does that answer the question? Yes. Cool.
Thank you. Yes?
I'd like to speak to the emergency services for EMTs. Why is that? Well, I know why. There's a huge delay when we call for an ambulance.
Yep.
And that is, I believe, because it goes, I know when I had to do it once, it went to Newport, and then it went to somewhere else and somewhere else. By the time they arrived, it was a long time. I was at the activity center, and someone had collapsed. And by the time, and everyone was very efficient. Your people come up, they come up to security at, in Eastman, and they're all waiting and looking for the ambulances. But by the time an actual technician gets to the patient, it's a huge gap. Can we improve that?
So did everybody hear the question? No. Okay, so the question is on EMT services here in Eastman. So when someone needs to be transported to the hospital, the ambulance comes from Lebanon. And the question is, how can we improve the response time, not only from the ambulance standpoint, but also care that's being offered to people who are in an emergent situation?
There's no problem with Eastman and Grantham. It's the relay system.
Yeah.
It's complex.
So in the recent past, we have all transferred over to Hanover Dispatch. So when you call 911, you're actually calling to Concord, to the base for 911 there. They will take the region you're in, they'll take the coordinates that come through your phone or the address you give them, and they'll find which dispatch center is actually dispatching those units. So they'll reach out to Hanover reach out to, sends out the tone for us. On average, that process is less than 3 minutes, depending on EMS or depending on what information they have to get. So if you call and say, my house is on fire, they're automatically calling those. But if you call and say, I'm feeling sick and I'm having abdominal pain, that's a longer process. They're going to ask you more questions so that we make sure that we get more information as we're going to you. So that's the process of getting us dispatched really is a pretty standard process. It's something that would be less than 5 minutes. The ambulance coming from Lebanon, they are the people they're going to transport. So we have a fast squad that will respond to the calls as they can because they all have full-time jobs. So they're call members that come in, we get paid on call, so if we have a call, they'll respond from their house or their jobs, if they can, to the station to get the ambulance and then come to you. On average, when someone is responding from a call, if they're available to come to that, it takes about 12 minutes for us to be on scene, on average. Lebanon ambulance is approximately 15 to 20 minutes, depending on if they're busy and they have to pull in from their second station. So ideally, we would get there first, help stabilize, and then Lebanon would come in to help. The challenge is we need more volunteers. We literally have nobody during the day except our police department who is trained as EMRs. They're going to come to you. A couple of the members of the police department have the ability to help stabilize, but they're really going to do oxygen. They're going to make sure you're in a comfortable spot if they can, and they're going to make sure that nothing is like bleeding out or anything that they can control. They're going to help with that. Because our EMS is not a full-time department, we are not able to dictate when people are able to come, right? So we don't have members that are at the station all the time. We only have people there as we're training or if they're coming down to respond to a call. So unfortunately, the best way to increase the speed getting there is more volunteers. So if you know anybody in town that has the capability or wants to, we are always taking applications. We really would love to have extra help. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and maybe you could put that out to the community.
100%.
Needs to be conveyed.
So we do have a sign currently that's up on the station. I will add it to the Eastman community, and I will actually have Melissa put it out in the Grantham community news as well. And we will increase that that call for help so that we can make sure that we get the people that are able to.
Yeah, one quick advertisement, by the way, house numbers.
Oh yeah, please, please, please.
House numbers, put them up. We can get them for you, have them out, have them visible. It makes it an awful lot easier for the responders to be able to get to you quickly. Larry.
Yeah, comment and a question. The comment is I had 2 incidents where I needed an ambulance to get to the hospital. It was dedication. It was medication related. You guys were doing it.
Thank you.
I just want to say that. And
We're
I'm still
very-
here because of you guys.
We're very lucky. We are very lucky to have the members that we do, and Lebanon Fire Department is an amazing group. Not only do they do our transporting, but they come help us train on a regular basis so that we can make sure our firefighters and our EMTs are to a certain level. So they're helping us with that continuing education too. So they bring more to the table than just response. But if there's things that you feel like we can do better, we want to know that because we're here to serve you. Understanding that time and people are always a need, but we want to make sure that we're here to support you in any way we can.
So while we're on the subject of safety, there's a lot of discussion here within the community about road safety. In fact, there's a commission or a committee that's been put together by the council to look at this issue and kind of come up with recommendations and things that we might be able to do. One of the questions, and this gives John a chance to chime in, is how we can better work together, Eastman and the Grantham Police Department, as far as making sure that reckless driving, DWI, things of those natures are not happening on our roads, putting people at risk. So Chief Parsons, ideas that you have on things that we can better do in working together to ensure that our roads remain safe.
And this has kind of been a topic since at least I've been here in 2006, and the main issue is pursuant to the bylaws in Eastman, your roads are deemed private. And up until 4 or 5 years ago, there used to be signs, you Pullman roads in Eastman's are private. Because they are private, they don't meet the statutory definition of a way pursuant to New Hampshire law. So speeding, you have to drive upon a public way. Your roads are not public. Stop signs have to be on a public way. They are not public. Crossing a yellow line has to be a public way. So predominantly the motor vehicle code, any of the motor vehicle code in the state of New Hampshire does not apply on the roads in Eastman because they are not deemed public. It's not my rule, it's not the town's rule, it is the state of New Hampshire, it spells it out in the RSA. The only 2 sections, there are only 2 areas of roads in the Eastman community that meet the statutory definition. One is the main entrance down as far as the public boat launch, because that road is maintained for members of the public to get to that boat launch. So pursuant to statute, that is deemed a public way. The other one is the main entrance up to this first entrance of Greensward into the parking lot here. Even though that road is maintained by Eastman Maintenance, it is a private way that is maintained to the benefit of the paying public, meaning they're coming in here, utilizing the restaurant, utilizing the golf course. That's what makes this portion of it a public way. It used to be a joke years and years ago that if you wanted to drive drunk in Eastman, all you needed to do was be able to make it out of the parking lot here and turn left. Because as soon as you made that left-hand turn, you were free and clear. And we have, as recently as 2010, we brought this up in a DWI-related crash over off of Anderson Pond Road, and we lost that case because the road wasn't deemed to be a public way. 2012, that changed somewhat. There was a case out of Moulton Borough in a community very similar to Eastman. It was a DWI-related crash that went all the way up to the state Supreme Court. And the state Supreme Court ruled that it was not the legislature's intent to create DWI-free zones. So they added a separate section definition to the definition of way that is specific just to reckless driving and just to DWI. So now, even if you make it to the left-hand turn, it doesn't work anymore. However, you read, what gets people stopped and arrested for DWI? Speed, directionals, equipment violations, stop signs, you name it.
Yeah.
None of that applies. However, if you happen to be unlucky enough and have a collision with something, that's completely, it's apples and oranges. So until such time as the bylaws or whatever gets changed, and it wouldn't necessarily, overnight you're not going to see, we're going to be sitting in here doing speed traps. That's not what we're about. Obviously, if we see something, we will get stopped. We will have a discussion. In the old days, sometimes it resulted in what we called education by citation. But by and large, we write far more warnings in this town than we do actually giving out monetary tickets.
Larry?
Chief, thank you. And we met, we discussed this. I was representing the special place chairs, which I am a Berkeley Hill special place chair. But you indicated at the time that a change could be made, particularly say on a road around the lake, that would then allow it to be a road that you guys could patrol. Could you just elaborate on that? Like, what would we need to do?
Again, I'm not sure how the specifics, the bylaws are within Eastman. And I don't know what act of God, act of Congress, act of whatever it would take to change that. That would obviously be for whatever corporate council that you utilize have. But something within that bylaw, and it's just realistically in the simplest section, everywhere it says private way, it would need to say public way.
The reason I raised that,
Because again, that's because it says private way is what removes the ability for any of the motor vehicle code, absent now DWI and reckless driving, from being enforced.
the reason I raised that, there was an incident coming in on the road by the upper courts that I experienced, where someone decided to pass a truck and pulled into the wrong lane and missed me by that much. But the reason I raised it is an hour earlier, that lane would have been filled with kids coming off the bus. I think this is a serious issue. I don't want to be around here later and people look back and say, why did you not do something about the reckless driving that could have wiped out at least 10 to 15 kids an hour later. So I just want to make sure that that is acknowledged by our reps.
Rick?
Rick Karish. Chief, thank you for the clarity. I've got it. This sounds like something we shouldn't publicize, that there's no enforcement of certain laws. Other things we should be publicizing. But I got a follow-up for you. Your cruisers do something that's wonderful. They're parked on a road, and as cars go by, the traffic is quieted down.
Yes.
They slow down. Every once in a while, your excellent officers flash the lights a little bit, and people get the message. Is there any reason you couldn't do that on the public portions of Eastman roads? And I believe that Draper Road, the back entrance is public up for at least a quarter of a mile.
Draper is public up until
Yeah.
Select
So-
Cold Spring. Or is it-
So the question is, could you please park your cruisers on these Eastman public roads every once in a while to send the message?
I used to sit right down here at the traffic circle,
Yeah.
watching people failing to stop coming down the hill at the stop sign. It was great because they blow through the stop sign, they go right around the corner because they're heading up the main entrance, and they go right to me. I'm like, hi, come here.
Anyway.
And we used to do that with some frequency, and I can't tell you the number of people who would stop, roll down their window, glare at me, and on more than one occasion asked if I had permission from ECA to actually be doing that. And I would smile and say, no, this is a public road, I don't need it, I need to have your license and registration, because that stop sign that you just went through, it doesn't get any redder. So we do that from time to time, especially more so in the summertime, the heavy traffic periods. And with 8 times out of 10, it's people who do not live in this community, whether it be Grantham proper or within Eastman. A couple made a comment earlier about the job that the police department does in keeping the town safe. We're only a portion of it. It is the townspeople as well, and that's all of us working together, being kind to one another, driving decently with one another. So it is a total group effort. So much like you brought up the educational component as well, that is something that you can pass on to your friends and family and whomever who might come to visit you, to say, hey, listen, could you please slow down, because town roads that we go on that we will get speeding related complaints. 9 times out of 10, it's not the residents, it's people who are going to visit said residents. So just passing that along. But we will certainly add to it. Sometimes we will sit in areas where we see you, but you don't necessarily see us. The boat wash right here is a great place.
Thank you. While we're on the subject of roads.
Sorry, just to follow up, I'm assuming or hoping that people on that traffic advisory committee are here, because the point made about the school children is chilling. And I know there have been conversations about traffic calming and quieting, and it may be that those, school bus crossing lights or stop signs, that is just a chilling eyewitness account of what could have happened had it been a moment's difference in the person illegally passing the bus or the truck. So I just hope this message or that video will get back. But a very quick note about motor vehicle operation and air quality. I know that the last thing you want to be doing is enforcing the state regulation against idling. I believe you can't idle over 30 or 60 seconds. Every time I go to Rumbrook, people are leaving their car at the pumps and it's idling, or in front of Rumbrook and it's idling, or same with Circle K. And I'm sure other places too, but I notice it at Rumbrook. And that CO2 goes right into the open doors at Rumbrook, and it affects people, particularly those who are already compromised with their pulmonary functions. So I don't know what your position is on the anti-idling law. And again, I know you have so many better things to do, but are your officers instructed, again, exempting all emergency and official town vehicles, are your officers instructed to comment if they see passengerless or driverless vehicles running, even though there's an anti-idling law for air quality?
The eons ago, when that law was enacted, it was more for people who would leave their keys in their car, let it go and let it idle and run in. So that would be, leave anybody realistically with the ability to, it's an unintended idling motor vehicle that anybody could get in and drive away with, or have some type of mechanical malfunction that caused the brakes to fail and we had a crash. Now with the advent of chip car, the keyless entry and the motor vehicle chip, where you can leave your car running and walk into the store, and allegedly your car is not supposed to be able to be driven away because that has kind of gone by the wayside. It was never, as far as I know, intended or created for such to deal with a pollution or a carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide.
I think that changed, but I'll get back to you.
Okay, I'm gonna move us along. I've got a few more minutes, right? A few more questions. On the subject of roads, again, related to the lake, there's a question about erosion. from back into Stony Brook, which ultimately works its way into Eastman Pond. We invested a fair amount here within Eastman to try and limit the amount of erosion into the lake. There are a number of different things that were in that report that I sent to you. Is the town willing to consider actions that might take care of some of the runoff issues that we've seen that are documented in that report? Is that something that you would be willing to look at?
Well, I think, being the liaison to the Conservation Commission, that maybe that's something that, Dave and his group can look into. Yes, Val?
Fair enough. That's right.
Yeah.
And I
Go ahead.
think too that we can certainly, I think that we can certainly talk with Jeff, our regent, to see what he has to say, and I think it'd be a good thing to see that report.
Good. Go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up on the training for the care of the salting of the roads. All our people here at Eastman have been trained in the Green Snow Pro program, which trains our people to use the least amount of salt necessary in a situation. We have certain parts of the lake that we have more runoff, so there's issues of how much salt is, but we adjust it, and also related to spraying roads for the summer when they're dry. Have the town crews been trained in this? This is a program offered through the state, I understand.
I will definitely check with Jeff. I can't tell you yes for sure, but I will certainly.
It's really a fine program, and one of
Yes.
our staff actually is a trainer, from what we understand. And I really would recommend looking into it because it relates, because many of our roads, like Grantham's roads, are dirt.
Right.
And it definitely relates to the treatment of those roads as well.
All right, another question that came up. Go ahead.
I was just gonna add to the erosion and the salt and everything else also with, is the chemical runoff that we get from the higher properties that then come down into the lake and cause algae blooms and all that. And I think that's part of, one of these exercises as well.
Yeah, so that is something that Lakes and Streams and the staff have been working with those property owners directly. Two more questions that came via email that I want to be sensitive to. Short-term rentals are becoming very popular all over the state. The town zoning map does not allow for inns or bed and breakfasts except by approval in places where these rentals currently exist as advertised on Airbnb or VRBO. This is a new world in which we all live. How do you differentiate when they are basically the same thing? And why are they not short-term rentals taxed as businesses? Because that's essentially what they are.
There we go, thank you. We have discussed this at the Board of Selectmen. Most recently, there was communication between Eastman and the board regarding a very noisy property here in Eastman. I don't know how that was resolved, but we do not have Airbnb regulation. And to my knowledge, there's only one property, and that's an Old Farms that's in Grantham that adheres to the state regulation and pays the tax. All others, to my knowledge, do not here in Grantham.
Should they, is the question.
I think they should.
Because you can look them up on Airbnb and
That's
see
true.
where they are.
That's true. And I for one think that they should. It's a way of regulating the use of the properties, and hopefully you wouldn't have the wilder parties that sometimes take place here. I recall myself sitting on the deck and somebody swimming in the pond over here. That's another story.
Okay, last question that came in via email deals with your vision for commercial development within our community, and how Grantham may adjust or adapt its current zoning or long-term property strategy to create a more neighborhood or in-town kind of experience.
The town of Grantham has been divided up into different zoning areas, and there is commercial zoning applied in various places in the town. It was assembled quite some time ago with a lot of input by people that came to many meetings and sort of arranged and figured out what they wanted to have, what they should have, what the future of the town should be. So we do have a regulation that involves what goes on with properties in the town. It includes commercial, it includes rural residential, and everybody is certainly welcome at any time to question why this is what it is, and if there's any need to change, we're more than happy to entertain if it's a substantial reason why the areas need to be changed from one zone to another. We'd be happy to make that happen and get the meeting together. And the problem is, as was so clearly stated years ago, when Grain Ledgers first moved in and organized the whole thing, and they were to have, at that time, it was somewhere in the vicinity of 50 or 60 units. And then they had, I can't remember exactly, it was somewhere around 15 or 20 acres, which was referred to as common property. And one person got up and asked the developer, well, you know, you have this 20 acres, can't that be turned into more condominiums? And he very clearly stated that you would have to get the entire condominium to agree upon that, and good luck with that. So, but we would love to work together. If there's something that you see in town that doesn't appear to be zoned as it, but you think it ought to be, we're certainly willing to accept any information and pursue, if it needs to be pursued, to be changed.
So look, one of the main objectives of this whole session was to introduce some people that spend a lot of time and energy supporting you and our broader community. You see their names, you now have heard their voices and their faces. These are people that have dedicated themselves to helping us and doing a great job maintaining our community. So I want to thank them for their time this evening. And invite you, to the degree that you have other questions or things that you'd like to ask them, not only this evening, but in other times, to realize that there are people that care, that are here to help you.
Our committee would like to thank them too for coming, and I know it's getting late. We appreciate your time. I'd also like to thank Nick here, who volunteers his time to videotape some of our programs. So anyway, thanks, Nick.